Today on Blue 58, contract news is dominating the early portions of Packers training camp. Some of it good and some of it less good. Let's sort through it and get down to business in training camp.
Blue 58!
Hello and welcome to another episode of Blue 58, the one and only podcast of thepowersweep.com. I'm your host, John Meerdink. Happy to be with you here for another episode. What an episode it is. We get to talk about something approximating actual football today. Before that, some exciting news of our own. We passed 100 subscriptions on Substack, which means that we've met our goal for bringing polling back for this year, which means polling is returning for the 2024 season. We're going to have weekly polls updating everybody on what people think of the key figures within the Packers organization, and as well as what people think about how the Packers are going to do week in and week out. Of course, if you'd like to be part of that, you can still sign up at thepowersweep.substack.com if you want to be a part of our weekly polling. It's absolutely free. You can choose to support Blue 58 and the Power Sweep there as well if you would like to. You don't have to, but you can get the same benefits that you get through our Patreon page if you choose to support there as well. And thank you to everybody who signed up. We're going to be asking for more subscriptions there throughout the course of the season. If you want to be, again, a part of the polling efforts there, that is something that you can choose to do. First news out of the gate, though, is Kenny Clark's new contract. Signs a 3-year extension with the Packers worth $64 million in new money, but since it's an extension, basically the value of it gets split over the 4 years that he has on his contract now, the 3 new ones and the 1 remaining. As of right now, according to a couple different sources, he is going to be 12th in average annual value among defensive linemen. That can and will change, probably pushing him further down the list, which seems like a really great value for the Packers. And it feels a little bit yucky sometimes to talk about guys and their livelihoods as a great value. Great value to who? Only to the Packers. I'm not paying him anything, so it doesn't matter to me if he gets a great value or not. But it seems like a really win-win contract for both sides. Clark has long-term guarantees now. The Packers get to have Kenny Clark for the long term. And fans in particular get to have Kenny Clark around, and we get to root for him for years to come now. I wrote about this at the Power Sweep yesterday, kind of a day removed from the news, trying to sit down and think about what I really felt about the deal. You know, what does this mean for his legacy? Had a hard time coming up with anything other than just relief. Relief is the feeling that I feel here. Because basically, since Brian Gutekunst took over as the Packers general manager, he's been tasked with refreshing their roster, and that's involved moving on from a lot of notable names in Packers history. A lot of notable names. Jordy Nelson, Clay Matthews, Randall Cobb 2 different times, Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, David Bakhtiari, Aaron Jones, all have been moved out of Green Bay, whether it was a good idea or not, in a couple of those instances. But shepherding guys through the end of their careers is part of the job of being a GM. So I'm not like assigning any moral value there. Of course, that's what Gutekunst should have done. He was right to do it in most of those cases, I think, and a couple of them are still kind of up in the air. But it still is a lot of L's to take as a fan, not getting to see a bunch of these guys finish their career in Green Bay. You know, if everything went how it was supposed to go, just let's use that word just because we have nothing else. If everything went how it was, quote-unquote, supposed to go, the Packers get to the Super Bowl in the 2020 season, win, Aaron Rodgers retires sometime in the next couple of years, but they make the transition to Jordan Love. David Bakhtiari never gets hurt, so he's still there. Davante Adams is still there and re-signs with the Packers because they've got all this cap money that they didn't spend on Aaron Rodgers. And we're into the Jordan Love era, much more seamlessly, but everybody kind of gets to end their careers in the Packers with the Packers on their own terms. Instead, we've had a bunch of discord and things like that, which is the norm, but Kenny Clark is at least getting us further down the track here without having to say goodbye to another notable name in Packers history. So good for him, good for the Packers for getting something done, and that sets the stage for Jordan Love's contract, because originally the word from Brian Gutekunst, and he told Cheesehead TV this pretty explicitly, that they weren't going to touch Kenny Clark's contract until the Jordan Love deal is done. Well, Kenny Clark's contract news breaks on Sunday. Everybody naturally assumes, here comes Jordan Love. We're going to get news today or Monday. about the Love deal, but then Brian Gutekunst stands up there Monday morning and is like, nope, we don't have a deal done. And Jordan Love's not going to practice until it is done. It's going to get done. It might be done already? Question mark. We're waiting to see. But as of right now, it isn't done enough that Jordan Love is on the field for training camp. So we're kind of in a holding pattern. I thought it would be done by now, and I'm very low-level irritated that it didn't get done on the timeline I put out last week and within that 24 to 48 hours that we predicted. But I really thought they would have it done by camp, and it's a little bit surprising to see that it's not done. Is it bad? Not particularly. You'd like to have Jordan Love out there, but when it gets done, we're going to look back at this time and be like, oh, yeah, it was just a blip on the radar. By October, nobody's going to be thinking about this. Is it kind of a bad look, though? Yeah, I would say so. What is the holdup here? Were they waiting for other dominoes to fall? Probably not. That doesn't seem like a great idea. The more time that goes by and other contracts or other quarterbacks sign their deals, it only gets more expensive for your guy. So what's the disagreement here? Is it could really be one of three things: years, overall money, or guaranteed money. Years probably isn't it. It's probably going to be like a 5 or 6 year extension, barring something extremely unusual. But that's usually the ballpark range there. It's usually a 5-year contract that's more like a 3-year contract, and then 3 years from now we'll do this all again. So it's probably not that. Overall money, that's a fairly good guess. Depending on what other guys are getting around the league, your guy wants to be at or above where they are. So whether the agent certainly is going to argue that he deserves to be above whatever anybody else is getting recently, because that's money in the agent's pocket too. And the quarterback probably wants to be there too, because get as much money as you can, which ties into the guaranteed money. If I had to guess, I would say the guaranteed money is probably the big holdup here for a couple of different reasons. First, external to the Packers, quarterbacks in general have been going for more and more guaranteed money. They're the most important position on the field. They are, to use a well-worn phrase here, the straw that stirs the drink here. So they might as well get the most money. I'm the most important guy. I should get the most money, and most of it should be guaranteed to me. I don't want it to be the fake pretend money that bumps up the estimations and everybody's reporting, but really is kind of fake because we're going to negotiate again anyway in a few years. They want the real, actual, hard and fast money guaranteed to them. Deshaun Watson set a big precedent for that. Kirk Cousins has played for only guaranteed contracts like the last half decade or plus. Quarterbacks are just tending to go more and more for that guaranteed money. So I would guess that's probably the holdup. And I would guess when we finally get some sourced reporting on this, when it finally breaks, we're going to figure out exactly what the holdup was, because Adam Schefter will find out, meaning by that Jordan Love's agent is going to text it to Adam Schefter, and Adam Schefter will get to say that he found out. But really, that's how that information process works. We'll figure out what the holdup was on the guaranteed money or whatever when the news finally breaks. Is this quarterback drama? If you've trolled around other teams' corners of the internet at all, as I have, maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment, you've seen some mild crowing about this. And technically, yeah, I would say that this is some quarterback drama. By definition, it probably is. But think about the recent quarterback drama we've had in recent off seasons. Let's rank it from the most dramatic to the least dramatic. The most dramatic has to be Aaron Rodgers' draft day trade demand on draft day in 2021. By far, the most dramatic moment there. I can remember sitting at my desk at work, feeling sick to my stomach in unbelief at the headlines that I was reading there. Like, is this actually going to happen? This was supposed to be draft day. This was supposed to be a day of fun where we would just get excited about the future of the Packers here, but instead we're talking about the star quarterback wanting out of Green Bay. And I believe to this day that had San Francisco not already traded up a bunch of draft picks to get Trey Lance, they could have and probably would have made a Godfather-type offer for Aaron Rodgers that season. And it would almost have been crazy to not take it. If it was even close to the deal that they made to move up to get Trey Lance, you would have almost have to take that for Rodgers. and just let the chips fall where they may for 2021. Maybe Love wasn't ready, but if you're going to move on from him at any point, if they would have offered like 3 first-round picks for him, which I think is the most that you could offer, or like 3 years out, maybe they had an extra one around. I don't remember the Trey Lance trade exactly, but had they had that, you'd have been almost foolish not to take it. That solves so many problems for you right then and there. But that is by far the most dramatic thing that we've had involving quarterbacks. Then a huge gap between that and number 2. But number 2 is Rodgers airing his grievances at the start of the 2021 training camp. I don't know if you've thought about that recently. Probably haven't. Probably good for your health that you haven't. But go back and look at that sometime. Just a remarkable moment in Packers history that the 3-time at that point MVP quarterback, who is going to go down as one of perhaps the greatest player in franchise history, and I'm not saying that he is or he isn't. That's for other people to discuss. I'm not worried about that. But he's going to go down as one of the greats in Packers history, and he's standing up there and just barbecuing the front office for half an hour. Unreal that is a thing that happened. Then another big gap. Then the third most dramatic quarterback moment is the Packers drafting Jordan Love in 2020, which I think is pretty self-contained but a fairly dramatic thing. A smaller gap between that and number 4. 4 and 5 are close together, but 4, for my money, is Aaron Rodgers not reporting to anything in the 2022 offseason, just after signing that huge extension. Then the uncertainty around Jordan Love at the start of last season and through the early portions of last season. Then you've got another big gap, and we finally arrived at Jordan Love not getting his contract done. We haven't even discussed everything that went on with Brett Favre circa 2007, 2008, I guess, or the things that happened with Brett Favre in the 90s. The point is, even if this is a dramatic moment, it's, as far as drama goes, we are miles away from the biggest drama. Now, could this spin out into something that's actually bad? I think yes. If this would linger into next week, if this would linger past the first preseason game, then we're in actual real trouble situation, because then you've missed a week and a half of training camp. That's affecting your evaluation of other guys, and you're heading into an actual preseason game where you're looking at trying to get reps together with people. It affects so much. It affects your preparation. It affects other guys around you. How can you evaluate how the offensive line responds to the quarterback if you don't have the actual quarterback in there? I don't think that's super likely. Hopefully by the next time we're talking together, which would be Thursday, we've got something sorted out. But just the fact that it's here to this point means it's a non-zero chance that there is some real legs to this, and it carries into next week. I am not worried about that yet. I reserve the right to get worried about it, of course. But we are miles away from actual drama, but those miles could pass pretty quickly the longer this goes on. Hopefully something has gotten done while we're actually recording this podcast. I'm not seeing any notifications on my phone or anything, so I'm assuming that nothing has gotten done. But we could get into really weird stuff here pretty quickly if something doesn't get done, but I think it is going to get done, hopefully very, very soon. So actual training camp. Now that we have Kenny Clark and Jordan Love out of the way, what's actually happening in Green Bay? Checking in on a few of the storylines. First, and most notably, there's already been one big cut. Peter Bowden has been released, the long snapper out of Wisconsin. Is the long snapper battle over before it actually got started? Maybe. We'll see. The Packers needed to clear a roster spot so they could have another quarterback, so they could really have enough quarterbacks to practice. Without Jordan Love around, they only have 2 arms. That's not enough guys to throw to their 12 receivers that they have on camp. So what do they do with that roster spot vacated by Mr. Bowden? They sign quarterback Jacob Eason, a 2024 4th-round pick by the Indianapolis Colts. I'm not going to dive too deep into his bona fides as a quarterback. Here's all I'll really tell you here. The Packers are his 7th NFL team. That gives you an idea of the caliber of quarterback we're talking about here. He played 2 seasons or parts of 2 seasons with the Colts, then played with the Seahawks, the Panthers, the 49ers, the Panthers again, the Giants, and the Packers. So I guess technically his 6th NFL team, given 2 stints with the Panthers there in 2 different seasons, 2022 and 2023. But he's been around a while. I would guess he's probably just around until Jordan Love signs, and maybe they come back to Bowden at long snapper after Love's deal gets worked out. I don't know how they're doing things with their kicking competition, but maybe they need more than one long snapper if they're trying to snap to 2 guys at once so they can both kick. But if they've only got one holder and Daniel Whelan. I don't know how complicated that all gets. In any case, they've got one long snapper right now after going out of their way to get one of the more highly regarded options at the position this offseason in Bowden to compete with Matt Orzik. So we'll wait and see what happens. It's one of the weird roster machination things, and one of the things that wouldn't have had to happen had Love's contract not been done. You can see why we could get into a situation where there is some actual legs to the drama angle here, but we're not there yet. Also of note, just before training camp started, the Packers signed two guys. Just wanted to mention them real quick. Rory Starkey and Jalen Wayne, both wide receivers, signed for training camp. Starkey, 6 feet tall, 214 pounds. Started his college career at Penn before finishing out at Samford, not Stanford, Samford. Was around for rookie training camp on a tryout basis. Now he returns. His height and weight kind of stand out a little bit. 214 pounds at 6 feet even. Pretty heavy for that size, almost like a quasi-running back. Interesting build there. Also ran a 4.45 at his pro day. Then you've got Mr. Wayne, who is an undrafted free agent after the 2023 NFL draft. The Bills, the Browns, and the Montreal Alouettes have employed him since then in limited capacities. He played his college football at South Alabama and was there for a while, in part due to the pandemic, but played there from 2017 through 2022 before beginning his professional career. Now, in terms of the actual storylines that don't involve contracts or, guys not being signed to contracts, let's put it that way, there really are two. You've got the offensive line and safety, and I want to take them in reverse order from what I mentioned here. But safety, we are seeing an early rotation of starters next to Xavier McKinney. Javon Bullard got the first looks next to McKinney, but today Evan Williams got some starter reps too. I think that's pretty indicative of the way that we talked about things going in our safety preview episode. Bullard is going to be the preferred option here, but I think Williams can get some reps too, but he is the third choice behind McKinney and Bullard. It's a versatile group of safeties. They've all got interesting skills and complementary skills and overlapping skills too. And I think that it's a really cool opportunity for the Packers to really mix and match depending on what they want to do in a given week and against a given opponent. They've got more options at safety, than I could really think of in a long, long time. It's been a long time since the Packers have had a versatile safety group where it seems like the guys that you're putting out there are actual players. It's one thing to have versatility and have guys that aren't actually any good. In fact, for players that aren't actual good players, sometimes talking about their versatility is just a way to disguise the fact that you're talking about a guy that isn't very good. Like you start saying, well, he can do a whole bunch of different things is sometimes just a nicer way of saying, well, he's really not good at anything, but he's versatile. It's kind of akin to the guy who changes positions late in his career, R.I.P. Alex Magoo. He was one of the guys he was the guy released to make way for one of those two receivers that the Packers signed. But talking about a guy's versatility and how he can fit in a whole bunch of places is really, it's akin to saying that we're going to try him at a different position or he doesn't have a real job, so we're just going to try to make one up for him. But we'll talk about how versatile he is. So you start talking about versatility, and it sometimes is a double-edged sword. But I don't think that's the case with the Packers' safety situation. And I think that's also not the case on the Packers' offensive line. They have a lot of guys and a lot of versatile guys and a lot of guys that seem to be pretty ready and able and willing to step in at a bunch of different positions. So offensive line, we've got Jordan Morgan working a little bit at guard, and we've got Elton Jenkins working a little bit at center this week. One of those things is not surprising, and one of them is. The unsurprising thing is Jordan Morgan working at guard. We expect him to be in the competition there. That is kind of the backwards from what I would really like to see. I want to see Jordan Morgan lose the tackle battle first before we decide that we want to make him a guard for this season, prove that he can't be the starting tackle, and then go from there. Because we know Rasheed Walker is not going to be a guard, but we know that with a little bit of work, Morgan might be able to make it work at guard for this year. They don't want to switch Walker around, but they think that Morgan can. So let's let Walker and Morgan battle it out at tackle, and then if Morgan wins at tackle, that kind of solves your guard situation as well. Doing it this way kind of seems to extend it out longer than it has to, but the Packers are almost above reproach in terms of putting guys at different positions, even when it seems counterintuitive, so I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Not that big of a deal. They're going to find a job for Jordan Morgan. And the best part is it's not a super big rush to get him on the field this year, just given the depth and options that they do have on the offensive line. Elgton Jenkins at center is interesting. There's a potential simple answer and a potential complicated answer here. The simple answer is that they maybe are just trying to get a look at Jordan Morgan and Sean Rhyan at the same time. To do that, you have to get Elgton Jenkins off the field, or you just move Elgton Jenkins to a different position, one where he may be the top backup anyway. As much as I like the idea of Jacob Monk playing at center, and he may be the center of the future, or maybe Zach Tom is the center of the future, in the short term, if something were to happen to Josh Myers, the most straightforward solution, the one that involves weakening the fewest amount of positions, might just be Elgton Jenkins at center and Jordan Morgan at left guard. So maybe we're looking at an emergency thing here, or maybe we're looking at a genuine competition with Josh Myers. I tend toward the first situation, but Andy Herman characterized it as a pretty extended run at center for Jenkins. That's interesting and of note. Let's look at the potential outcome here. If the Packers have their ideal lineup with everybody available on the offensive line, if Jenkins moves to center, is at center, I would think a lineup left to right of Rasheed Walker, Jordan Morgan, Elgton Jenkins, Sean Rhyan, and Zach Tom sounds pretty good to me. The question marks there would be Morgan and Ryan, less so Walker. We know that Walker can do it, but having two relatively unproven guards would be a bit of an adventure. But it's a manageable situation there, and I think you can hide inexperienced guards a lot easier than you can hide inexperienced tackles or even a center who you're having problems with. That is an interesting lineup to me. So Walker, Morgan, Jenkins, Ryan, Tom, left to right, may be something to keep an eye on or keep an eye out for. Finally, on the offensive line, we got a little bit of news about Andre Dillard getting some reps at right tackle with Zach Tom out. Now, Zach Tom remains on the physically unable to perform list or the non-football injury list due to his pec injury. This offseason lifting weights, there's a rash of those in Green Bay. He had one. Tucker Kraft had one. Matt LaFleur even had one, but he doesn't need his pecs to coach, so I guess he's good to go. But while Tom is out, Andre Dillard is getting primary reps at right tackle. This seems to me like a prove you can't do it sort of situation. The Packers are just going with their veteran option here to see, is he really not better than any of other options? So we're going to give him a chance to get worked over here. And if it turns out that he can't do it, well, then we'll go with one of our more inexperienced guys, like a Morgan, like a Caleb Jones, like a Luke Tenuta, while Zach Tom figures it out or gets back to full health. Based on today's reporting, it sounds like we're getting an answer there, and the answer is, at least against Rashawn Gary, he can't do it. He's getting reportedly worked over fairly good in practice today, which is maybe done now. It was ongoing at the time when I started recording, but we're just about to the end of things for today. I don't think Dillard is going to be a real serious primary option at tackle for the Packers. This is a break class in case of emergency here, and hopefully the emergency would be we're 2 or 3 or maybe 4 tackles deep at this point, but veteran tackle play is something that's always worth keeping an eye on. If you can get one, the Packers did get one. Never a bad idea to have some veteran depth around if you can, because tackles are rare and expensive, and if you can get one on the relatively cheap, not a bad guy to have around. But if you can't do it, you got to look at some other options here, and the Packers are giving Dillard an opportunity to prove that he can't do it, and we'll see how that experiment works out. Good to have football back. Good to have actual stuff to talk about. Good to have real things to weigh and consider and work on, rather than just hypothesizing about how this guy could do this year if things go right for him. Now we're getting real options to look, or opportunities to look at what's happening on the field and talk about who's getting what opportunities and when. In the meantime, though, that's all I've got for you in this episode of Blue 58. I appreciate you tuning in. I'd appreciate it even more if you take a second and share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it. That's going to help more people find the show. and get more people involved in this conversation you and I are having about the Green Bay Packers, which in turn is going to help all of us, me included, become smarter Packers fans. And as I always say, smarter Packers fans are better Packers fans, and better Packers fans are what we all want to be. I'm your host, John Meerdink. We'll see you next time on Blue 58.